In these uncertain economic times, it's easy to be worried about protecting your wealth, your hard-earned savings, and your family's financial future. Plunging interest rates, the devaluating dollar, and political unrest constantly threaten what you have worked hard to earn and all that you own. That's why now it's more important than ever to protect your assets and have the money you need to make your dreams come true. Welcome to the Global Wealth Fortress Report with successful global entrepreneur and wealth preservation expert Joel Nagel. Joel's helped thousands of people just like you protect what you have so that you can make even more and make your every dream come true. So, sit back and enjoy Joel Nagel's offshore expert advice on how you can live the good life at a great price, where the sun never sets on your financial fortress.
Hello and welcome to Joel Nagel's Global Wealth Fortress Report. We have an urgent edition today. Because triggered a great deal by what's happening in Canada, this whole idea of asset seizure. And fortunately, we have America's #1 asset protection attorney to discuss it with us, tell us what he's hearing and what you can do about it. Joel, welcome and thank you.
Hey, Carter. Good to be with you. And thanks for having me today. I'm coming to you live from beautiful Ambergris Key, Belize, where it's sun shining. I'm looking out over the crystal aqua blue green Caribbean waters, and nobody here is too worried about any of these issues. But for our viewers back home, this is a very serious and urgent issue.
Joel, first of all, I envy you where you are. And my wife and I are hoping to go down to our place in Honduras in a couple of weeks. So we will finally get a share in some of your sunshine down there in Central America. But the situation, let's just be blunt about it. The situation in Canada has sent shockwaves throughout certainly the United States, maybe the Western world. This whole idea of if people disagree politically with those in power, that their assets can be seized. What the heck is going on?
Yeah, well, we've seen this, this sort of takeover by the financial system in both the U.S. and Canada. It's been going on for quite a while. It really started to accelerate in the U.S. after 9/11, and the creation of the Patriot Act, for example, shortly after the terrorist attack, in the World Trade Center, was grounds for essentially the government starting to turn the banks into an instrument of the government. I mean, it truly is big brother, and the banks. And by the way, the banks don't like it at all. I sit on some
really,
banks, and yeah, I mean they're basically being forced to become the financial police of the government. And at the end of the day, the governments have always had the power to do what's happening now. They've just restrained from doing it, right? In the U.S., for example, for the last long period of time, you had asset seizures, asset forfeitures whenever there were certain types of activity. If the police pulled you over, you're a suspected drug dealer, and you had a suitcase with $1 million in the back of your car, they could take that money. And instead of innocent until proven guilty, the money, they're saying, yeah, you're innocent until proven guilty. But that constitutional right doesn't apply to the money itself. So they would take the money, and then, it was the other way around. You would be guilty until proven innocent, and you'd have to prove where the money came from, that it's of legitimate source. And, it happened in these limited situations where, nobody's going to go to bat for, drug dealers, right?
Yeah.
So if it was contained there, nobody would worry about it too much. But the problem is, I can remember one of my constitutional law professors saying, it's kind of like the donut. And, if you're mainstream American or mainstream Canadian, you're in the middle of the donut. But you have all this activity. People are nibbling around the outsides of the donut. And if you just sit there and say, not my problem, not my problem, I don't care about drug dealers, I don't care about terrorists, none of those other people have rights. Well, pretty soon they're going to bite into the middle of the donut. And
Excellent.
that's exactly what just happened in Canada. So instead of it being, some targeted specific, potential criminal, they've just made a whole class of people subject to these forfeitures. Anybody who is protesting against, vaccinations. Like, what does that have to do with terrorism, right?
Unbelievable.
So yeah, that's kind of what's happening. And we I would say historically, the number of Canadians that would contact my office for assistance, is a very, very small in relation to Americans. But in the last couple of weeks, we've seen it flip 180 degrees, and the Canadians are scared, they're anxious, they're afraid. They don't know if tomorrow, their money is going to be grabbed. If they're if they have any assets in cryptocurrency, the Canadian government has made it clear that that is potential funding of terrorism by using cryptocurrency. So it's a very, very it's a very thin veil what they're using right now. There's not much to it at all. Basically, like you say, they're just saying, hey, we have the right to seize your money, and we very well may, particularly if we don't like what you're doing. And for a lot of Canadians and Americans, that goes against core constitutional and universal rights, even not just rights that belong to us as Americans, but universal rights that everybody enjoys, which is the right to be, the right to your privacy, the protection of your assets, and that the government, without any kind of judicial process whatsoever, they don't need a warrant, they don't need to have proof. They can just now come and call up the bank and say, hey, seize Carter's assets, freeze them till we get to the bottom of this. I mean, that is, for most Canadians, that is completely unbelievable. In fact, most of the Canadians I'm talking to, they're saying, we always knew that kind of stuff happened in America, but we never expected it to happen here. And there's a huge backlash on the Canadian Premier Trudeau, and I wonder if he's even going to be able to politically recover from it. That's how huge the backlash is right now.
Well, and of course there should be a backlash. And I want to ask you what you're advising these new clients are coming and your current clients. But first, let me point out to the American people, do not feel that you are insulated from this, because Nancy Pelosi has already said that what Trudeau is doing is wonderful. And 6 months ago, the Biden administration National Security Council out of the White House announced that anyone, I wish I were making this up, but I'm not, anyone who harbors anti-government or anti-authority sentiment can be charged under the Patriot Act with domestic terrorism and their assets seized. 2 weeks ago, the Biden Department of Homeland Security issued a directive that anyone who spreads, quote, disinformation about the 2020 election or COVID can be deemed a domestic terrorist and under the Patriot Act again, have their assets seized. So I don't want the American people to feel like, well, that's north of the border. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I mean, President Biden in his inaugural address spoke about trying to bring the country back together. But in reality, the way they've defined, the universe of people that can be targeted, essentially, if you even voted for Donald Trump in the last election, you could be deemed a domestic terrorist. It's truly unbelievable. And like I said, some of the asset forfeiture laws have been on the books for a long time in the U.S. So it's really more a question of how widespread they're going to try to use these laws. And Canada's trying to break down the mold and say you can use them for basically anything. And I think that'll be tempting, for the U.S., for Germany, for France. I mean, it's you push back the boundaries of what's acceptable. And if people don't fight back hard enough, I mean, I would love to see another, Newt Gingrich type contract with America. Yeah. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Communist. I don't care. You're either for this or you're against it. And I would vote against any politician of any political party that thinks that this is okay. I mean, that's how strongly I feel about it.
I think Rick Scott from Florida is working on just that type of a program. contract with America type activity that Gingrich did, I think, back in '94. So I'm with you 100%.
Because remember the donut, eventually going to get to the middle, and it's everybody. It's not just the people you don't like, it's you. And then you wake up one morning and you find out, your credit cards are frozen, your checking account's frozen, you don't even have enough money to buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks. It's going to become very, very real. So you were asking, like, what can people do?
What can people do?
I think there's a fairly simple answer, and it doesn't require, hiring me or somebody like me. I mean, number one, almost advice I give to almost anybody in my field, the asset protection field, is to consider opening up a foreign bank account, right? Because you're going to go to a different jurisdiction. They're going to have different rules. Most of the offshore asset protection jurisdictions, the benefit of the doubt is always going to be given to the individual. And in fact, the hardest thing will be to open the account, because they're going to do a lot of due diligence on you and make sure you're not a criminal. But once you've sort of passed that due diligence, now you have very, very good protection. And, some of the, offshore banks now, they're linked with credit cards, they're linked with crypto. There's a lot of ways that you can move money in and move money out. And I think it's something that you don't need to set up an expensive trust or a company or anything, any of the type of work that I do, which obviously I would recommend as well.
Right.
But this is so generic and applies to everyone. If you only even have, $5,000 or $10,000 you want to, protect and use to open up an account somewhere, I would highly recommend you to do that. Because
all right, so you're in Belize right now. How would you said somebody has, let's say, 5 or 10,000? How would it even go about? Like for me, I would have no idea even how to go about getting a hold of a Belize bank. What do you do?
Yeah, it's not that hard. I mean, with the internet these days, there's a wealth of information. Most of these banks, they're not allowed to advertise in the U.S. because there's some laws that forbid foreign banks and foreign insurance companies from promoting and marketing in the U.S. But that doesn't stop them from posting things, on the internet. You can do Google searches. What I'd recommend is if you find some nice marketing material about a bank and seem like, hey, this is a good bank for me, double check, go look for some reviews online, see what kind of, good reviews or bad reviews you can find. Most jurisdictions, Belize is one of them, all of the very important data about the bank's capital, its size, whether there's been any issues or problems with it, are all on the central bank's website. So you can go to the central bank in the country where you're contemplating opening up an account and just check there. And that, to me, that's a very good sort of check and balance to make sure you're not being, bamboozled into something that maybe is, instead of protecting yourself, you're going the other way. I mean, somebody contacted me not long ago and they were telling me about a bank account in the Ukraine that was paying 18% interest on deposits. And I said, well, I don't really feel comfortable, putting money in the Ukraine right now. Obviously with the geopolitical stuff going on in the world, it's a shame that the banks had to offer that kind of interest rate to lure deposits. But, it's not a question of what your interest rate is. It's the old adage about getting back your principal, right? So, I like to see, one nice thing about a lot of offshore jurisdictions is you can get a little bit better interest rate. But if the interest rate's too high, then I start to scratch my head and be a little bit skeptical. If I'm seeing 18%, there's a reason for it. They have some kind of issue problem. They're getting desperate. So I wouldn't go for any, bank that's doing that. But it's not that hard. There are jurisdictions like Switzerland where they want $1 million just to say hello. But, other jurisdictions, Belize being one, it's very user friendly. You can open an account with, put a couple $1,000s in it or however you're comfortable starting and go from there.
All right, let me ask you this, not to put you on the spot. We're talking about the banks. Now, you and your partner, Mike Cobb, with ECI Development, you have beautiful, gorgeous residential resort communities or are building, started some of them, in 6 countries now: Belize, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, and Panama. with those six, how many do you feel comfortable? Would you feel comfortable saying to people, the banking industry in those six countries, obviously most of them just jump out at you is, perfect. But overall, what would you say? Like if I said to you, how about Honduras? What's your advice on something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. First of all, you don't always have to bank in the jurisdiction where you live. So,
Right.
for example, I'm not crazy about the banks in Mexico, but I have tons of clients that, retirees or have a home and love Mexico. I'm not crazy about the peso, for example. But I have clients that, for example, live in Mexico and then they bank from a country like Belize. Belize has very good laws that allow you to keep your currency in whatever currency you want. So, some banks here can allow you to have it in dollars or euros or Swiss franc or British pounds or whatever currency you want. So that's what I like about that. But on your short list, most of those countries do have very good banking. I mean, Belize and Panama jump right to the top because they're classic tax havens. They have their asset protection jurisdictions where it's almost impossible to get information for somebody to bring a lawsuit and try to get information about your account. But the other countries have solid banks as well. I mean, even a country like Nicaragua, you might think, well, that's is that a good country for banking? Yeah, it is. I mean, you can keep your money in dollars if you don't want to go into Cordobas, and Costa Rica has good banks. I mean, they really all do. And El Salvador, of course, now for the last 6-7 months has adopted Bitcoin as a secondary legal currency. So it's very easy if you don't like fiat currencies at all, and you go there, maybe you have a small account to buy your groceries in dollars because that's their other currency. There's no local currency anymore, and then you can keep your more of your resources in in a cryptocurrency or something like that.
All right, I'm glad you brought up the Bitcoin because we have limited time left, and I really. We mentioned Bitcoin early. We know that there's an assault in Canada on cryptocurrencies. I mean, they've just gone totally bonkers. I'm going to be honest with you. My 40 years in politics tells me Canada's a beta site, that the U.S. is watching it, and they're going to copy that same totalitarian regime if they get a chance. That's just my opinion.
It's almost like a proxy war. I agree.
That's an even better way of putting it. How about, what are you recommending in terms of asset protection on Bitcoin? Now, I know that in El Salvador, El Zante, you're building El Zante, which is going to be a wonderful community, and people can buy in Bitcoin. They make their purchase in Bitcoin.
Once it's legal tender, then the merchants have to accept Bitcoin, right? You can't say no.
So what do you? I guess I'm asking you for a prognostication. As we see this assault on people's assets in Canada, and I think it's going to spread here, is Bitcoin, could it be that Bitcoin is a place people need to get money into just as an asset protection, not as an investment, but as an asset protection?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the thing that makes it a good asset protection asset is the fact that it's not under the control of governments anywhere, right? I mean, you've heard countries like China say, "Oh, we're going to ban Bitcoin," but how can they really do that? I mean, anybody with a computer and a modem can buy it and sell it and hold it, and same thing. I mean, the Canadians have an all-out war now on crypto because, again, they can't control it. They don't like that. No government likes the notion of not being able to control financial transactions in the country. But and by the way, I think the whole world's a little topsy-turvy right now, not only because of what's going on in Canada, but look what's happening in Russia and the Ukraine right now. And you're seeing traditional asset protection assets like gold, for example, has spiked in the last week, 10 days. It's hovering right around $2,000. And I think people have the mentality, if war is going to break out or things are going to get really bad, that they're going to go towards gold. But I think younger generations and other people are saying, but hold on, Bitcoin is finite, and and the governments can't print it and create it. So over time, there's really, when you talk about long periods of time, there's only one way for a Bitcoin to go, and that's up. And that's because, governments are going to just keep printing and printing and printing. So if you're comparing on the one hand, an asset class that's infinite, meaning fiat dollars, against an asset class that's finite, meaning Bitcoin, then it's over time, it's always going to take more and more and more of the infinite currency to buy the same unit of finite currency. So, I'm not an investment advisor. I'm not telling you what's going to happen. In the short run, I could see Bitcoin going down quite a bit because, again, people aren't exactly sure, how to maneuver through these crazy, we're really right on the brink of war in Europe. And that's not happened, there in 75 years, and people don't really know how to react. Some of them are buying gold, some of them are getting cash. And so I think Bitcoin is in the short run going to maybe be hurt like some of these other asset classes, stock market, and everything's down, right? But I think in the medium and long term, a finite asset, Bitcoin, gold, those types of assets, real estate, they're going to do very, very well in my view.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because, it looks to me like we are heading into deeper turbulence. So I'm just going to say it. I think deeper turbulence at home and abroad, and which makes your advice to people all the more important, and folks, I want to, nagellaw.com, nagellaw.com. Go there, check it out. In closing, let's make a point we've made before. Folks, you don't have to be a millionaire to protect your assets. As a matter of fact, Joel, you've said before, if you have less, sometimes you need to protect it more, right?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, you might not be able to replace it. I have clients that call me and say, hey, my parents passed away and left me $200,000. It's the only $200,000 I'm ever going to have. Yep. So, they can't afford to take risks. They can't afford to blow it. I guess my parting advice would be, with all the turbulence going on, do something before there's a problem, right? I mean, if war breaks out in Europe, full-blown war, that's not the time to be trying to open up a bank account in Switzerland or wherever. Why? Even if they're taking new accounts, you're going to be in line behind hundreds of thousands of other people, because lots of people are going to do nothing until we're in full-fledged war in that sense. Canadians they're at that point now. They're saying, I never did anything because I didn't think I had to. And now they have a gun to their head and they feel like, it's super urgent. So take advantage of maybe what's the calm before the storm. If you take a couple hours and open up a foreign bank account, you never need it. God bless you. You're great.
Yeah.
It's not gonna hurt you. It's only gonna help you. So if that would be my advice. Take some baby steps. Dip your toe in the water, and if you like that and you want to do something more complicated, create a structure, trusts, foundations, companies, partnerships, foreign investment, foreign real estate. That's what my firm is here to help you with. But take some action. I think action versus inaction. This is, like you say, these are turbulent times. They're probably only going to get more turbulent.
Joel, thank you, folks. nagellaw.com. This is the time to do it. You remember, Joel, General MacArthur in the speech at West Point, one of the final speeches, said that the most tragic words in the English language are too late. Yeah, so it's exactly what you were saying. So thank you. Thank you very much. This has been fantastic. Folks, take it from the expert. You can't get better than Joel Nagel, America's #1 asset protection attorney. Take an action now. Take an action now to protect yourself and your assets. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Carter. We'll talk to you next week.
Let's do this thing, folks. Let's do this thing now.